Innocence Project. My name is Daniela Jaug, Dani, Americans call me. I'm assistant professor as a joint appointment between the Departments of Criminal Justice Studies and Sociology at the University of Akron. Both departments are co-sponsoring this event today, but really this is an event brought on by student organizations, the two local chapters of the Ohio Innocence Project University Network at Tiffin University and here in Akron. And you will meet the student leadership of Tiffin a little bit later. I'm really grateful that I have the honor to guide you through this event with a powerful panel of speakers. Our special guest today is Janae Powell. She is a former legal fellow of the Ohio Innocence Project, and she is just a powerhouse, cool, Black female legal scholar, JD to be. We need a lot more of those. And also, we have an amazing panel of 4 wrongfully convicted men who take their time out of their days to share their stories with us. We are grateful to Louise Glover, Robert McClendon, Ruel Taylor, and Raymond Towler for being with us. You have already heard from Raymond Towler today, so he has communicated through his music, the music you heard in the beginning. Raymond actually has published 2 CDs, and we will be posting links in the chat. Together, those 4 served 80 years of prison time for crimes they did not commit. In fact, the majority of the panel was not even present at the crime scene. And we'll get to know their stories better in the next 1.5 hours. I give you more information as we get to them. And all information about their cases are also posted on the event website. For this event, you will find a recording there. The link to the event website is posted in the chat. And speaking of the chat, you can all use the chat. You are welcome to comment. You can ask questions starting now. The format of the event is that I will give you a little bit of context, why we are doing this, and that I will go around the panel one time, and then the floor is already open for your questions. Also, speaking about the chat, in good old feminist tradition, I would like to make invisible work visible and honor the people behind the scenes today that are making this event happen. In Austria, which is my home country and also responsible for my fat German accent, in Austria we have this expression, a gray eminence. A gray eminence is a person brilliantly working behind the scenes, orchestrating persons and situations, but not really being present in the scene. The gray eminence of this event today and many other events is Piers Reed. He is the program director for policy, legislation, and education at the Ohio Innocence Project in Cincinnati. Just an amazing person who has inspired us in Akron since a year now and brought amazing education and events to you. I also want to honor his assistant, Katie Woods, who is our technical host today and who has also published a call-in number. In case you get disconnected, you can just call into this event on your phone. Okay. I want to honor Stephen Hurwitz from Tiffin University, who is the faculty mentor for the Tiffin chapter, who helped prepare the event, and you will meet some of his students a little later as they are closing the event. I want to say thank you. You are so awesome to my colleague, Dr. Insun Park, who is collecting your questions in the chat, and we are collaborating on a lot of stuff, but also on this Innocence Project chapter. And last but not least, the sparkling president of the Sociology Club at the University of Akron is Garrett Decker, and he's also helping with the chat today, and the Sociology Club is also co-sponsoring this event. Let me tell you about the Ohio Innocence Project in the words of Gray Eminence Piers Reed. The Ohio Innocence Project was founded in partnership with the University of Cincinnati College of Law in 2003. Since its founding, The Ohio Innocence Project has freed over 30 Ohioans who served approximately 600 years for crimes they did not commit. OIP, as I will call Ohio Innocence Project in the following, continues to devote itself to freeing people who are in prison for crimes they did not commit. A team of 5 lawyers and 20 law students investigate hundreds of claims each year. In addition, OIP advocates for legislation that reforms the criminal justice system to prevent wrongful convictions. OIP has been involved in major reform efforts, including Senate Bill 77, which in 2010 mandated police departments to use best practices in witness interrogations, photo arrays, live lineups, and in collecting and preserving DNA evidence. More recently, OIP was instrumental in bipartisan efforts to reform the compensation system for people who have been wrongfully convicted. OIP's most recent effort on Capitol Square is a bill that would require Ohio's law enforcement agents to record custodial interrogations. OIP's public education programs include work with professional organizations, community groups, and in high schools and colleges around the state. The largest education program is the OIPU network, including the chapter here at Akron, as well as 10 other universities around the state. On behalf of OIP's Board of Advocates, staff, and clients, thank you for joining us today and taking the time to learn about wrongful convictions. This is actually a very crucial time of the year. October 2nd was Wrongful Conviction Day, commemorated the 7th time in the United States. And this event also is in line and in this context in a whole bunch of events around the country, but really dozens of events also brought on by the Ohio Innocence Project. You will hear a little bit more later. And you can also follow up with the Ohio Innocence Project and look what else is out there on the event homepage. So, as I said, I give you a brief context, general context and rationale for this specific event. And because I'm an academic, I have prepared a couple of slides. With infographics, the Innocence Network has recently published on research and some numbers on this connection and intersection between wrongful convictions and racial disparities. And with each slide I will then invite one of the panelists to share their own thoughts and their own stories on that. Once we are through one time, the floor is open for your questions. In this event, we are not using the Q&A function you might be seeing. We are using the chat. So whenever you have a question, just post away in the chat. Make sure it's directed to everyone. And we thought it might be just also awesome for you to build on each other's question and learn from each other while the event is going on. At the end of the event, there will be also an email survey invitation, and you can win some pretty cool OIP swag if you want to voluntarily give your email address. But we definitely will continue to make this event happen and make them better. So why this event? We had some large conversations on systemic racism and police misconduct in the last half year. In fact, the icon of prison abolition, Angela Davis, said she has never experienced a moment like that in American history where people are so attentive to what's going on with racism in the criminal justice system. And mostly, these discussions are centered around individuals, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. We are interested here that we shift the focus from individual cases to systemic and larger patterns and look at how systemic racism is playing out in the field of wrongful convictions. And what we are trying to do here in good old sociological manner is trying to connect the macro view, so these abstract numbers and data, to this micro level of experiences. Because you will see that life chances, what this event today says is that actual life chances and life expectancies are shaped by systemic racism, and wrongful convictions have a lot to do with that. So with us today are 4 men, as I said, who were wrongfully convicted and imprisoned and eventually freed with the help of the Ohio Innocence Project. One thing they have in common is their wrongful conviction and the years of their life lost to an unjust and ineffective criminal justice system. The other thing they have in common is that they are Black, and we want to give them the floor to share their perspectives and bring to focus this intersection of race and wrongful conviction into this larger picture of criminal injustice and racist policies we are discussing at a broader level in this country. You certainly have noticed that cities were burning around us, and social movements around the Black Lives Matter movements, but a lot more other movements, initiatives to end racial injustice have reached an unprecedented degree of acceptance and reach. We get educated like never before, and it's very important that we address this undigested history of oppression and genocide of Black and brown people that was really happening in this country. And I'm saying this as coming from Austria, as coming from a perpetrator country in the genocide of Jews, yeah. And I have example. I'm not saying Austria is a good example, but I think Germany is a good example how we might address and keep in fresh memory that we never want to have certain forms of genocide and oppression happen again, and to establish norms, also legal norms, to not make that happen again. COVID-19 is the latest example how systemic disparities in society play out. The virus, COVID-19, is not discriminating, but the social structures in these countries are, and we find ourselves in a situation where Black and brown people are most at risk at contracting and dying from the virus. This is, for example, shown in the COVID racial data tracker. Ibram X. Kendi has co-developed this data tracker, and we are linking to that on the event website. And you can see it's basically unfathomable, but also so clear that lives and deaths are determined by systemic racism. Why are more Black and brown people dying from that and contracting it? There is many reasons. For example, they have less access to healthy food and health care in this country, so they are more prone to underlying health conditions, and they receive less care and lower quality care once they are already infected. They are also disproportionately represented at the front lines. They are working for us out there as service workers and are more at risk to contract the virus. As service workers, they are also getting disproportionately lower wages, which is showing us the income inequality and the larger picture of wealth inequality we are facing along color lines. At the same time, the President of the United States has just issued an executive order on September 22nd on combating race and sex stereotyping. It's not what you think it might be, because really what that order does is it walks back progress in anti-racist thought we have now accomplished. And it, for example, claims that it is a false belief that America is a sexist and racist country. But we have to talk color. That's why we wanted to do this timely discussion against the color blindness. If we want to address racial disparities, we have to talk racism and anti-racism as an action word, and we have to address color. I have talked a lot. I'm now leading finally for what you have come today. As academics, we are committed to evidence and research. As said, I show you a couple infographics here along with the speakers The research results I want to present are based on a 2017 report of the National Registry of Exonerations on Race and Wrongful Convictions. The registry is a project of the Newkirk Center for Science and Society at the University of California, Irvine. It was founded in 2012 and provides detailed information about every known exoneration in the United States since 1989. It's a wonderful database. There is links to all the stories of our panelists as well. We are linking to that on the event website.
So, or that's just the United States?
The report on race and exonerations is based on 1,900 cases, which in itself is a staggering number. And let's see. I'm going to pull up the first slide I have for you. Black people are disproportionately affected by wrongful convictions. People of color are disproportionately represented at every stage of the criminal justice system that we have already learned, yeah? From arrest to conviction to the prison cells and to death row. It is exacerbated if we look at wrongful convictions. African Americans are only 13% of the American population, but a majority of innocent defendants wrongfully convicted of crimes and then later exonerated. The black people constitute 47% of the 1,900 exonerations listed in this National Registry of Exonerations. Laurice Glover is one of the East Cleveland Three you might have heard about, who was a juvenile and transferred to adult court for trial on murder charges in 1996. He spent 20 years in prison before he got exonerated. Laurice, you were a kid getting tied up in a huge injustice system, and you lost 20 years of your life. Can you please tell us about your experience? And maybe even if you feel moved, if you think that race played a role in your wrongful conviction.
I would say that I totally agree that race played a role in my conviction, considering that me and my two friends, we was three young black kids, and we was from the ghetto. And throughout that experience, like, it was like so much information that was shown that, you know, we wasn't the suspects. It led to so many different other people, as far as like with the victim and his brother had something going on with some people, and then it was like something with drugs related, and all of this evidence pointed to somebody else. But, you know, the police never took the time out to investigate it like that. They just looked at us. You know, we was three young black kids from the ghetto, and out of the three of us, only one of them was in a household where both parents was involved. And I think that they thought, you know, we could just put it on them, close the case, and get it over with. But luckily for us, our family believed in us, and we had three families that fought the whole years that we was incarcerated. Like, they protest, they used to be downtown in front of the Justice Center, in front of the 8th District Appeals Court, in front of East Cleveland Police Station. Rain, sleet, snow, they was out there protesting for us. Every time we came back to court, all of our family, people from the community came and flooded the courtroom. So I don't think that they believed that it would end up how it ended, with us having so much support behind us, because, like I said, we was three young black males from the ghetto. So I definitely believe race played a part in our conviction. And as far as like my experience with it, like going through that situation at such a young age, you know, I was naive to the system. I always thought, you know, the police is here to protect and serve. I always thought, you know, if you were innocent of what you did, you know, you go to court there, straighten it out, and, you know, to get resolved. So I had no knowledge of anything corrupt going on with the system at that time, because I was so young. So I just always believed that, you know, everything would be okay because we was innocent, and it didn't work out like that. You know, it took us 20 years for us to get our freedom back after going through that whole ordeal. So, you know, that opened my eyes to a whole lot of things as far as like going through that. And I think it's my family as well, because before it happened to me, like, I don't think me or nobody in my family ever heard anything about wrongful convictions or anything like that. You know, you always had that mindset, if the police arrest you and you go to jail, like, you must have done something. So it definitely opened my eyes to a whole lot of things.
Yes, I think your story shows how it is sort of hopeful, because your family, you say your family showed up, friends showed up. It shows me that we can do something, if we really think every one of us basically can show up for an incarcerated person that might be innocent. If I understand your case right, the prosecutor at that time, Carmen Marino, has actively held back evidence and research regarding your case. No? There was an active omission. There is research out there, for example, by Jonathan Pfaff, who suggests the immense role prosecutors really play in racial injustice. They are really gatekeepers of power and life chances. So, I mean, you were actively sabotaged by a system. I wonder, how can you ever heal, or can you ever trust again that this is a criminal justice system?
Yeah, that's been like real difficult for me too, because you know, like all them years we was fighting, you know, we was going after we had one witness that testified on us, and eventually she came to court and recanted. So they still saying the conviction would have held because of the junk science they had. And we did everything to discredit that, and it still was hard for us to get out. So for the whole time that we was incarcerated, we just kept trying to get them public records. We kept trying to get them, and they would never give them to us. And then in 2014, they made a public records request, and finally we got it. And when we got it, it was like 70 pages long. And the first sheet of paper at the top of the police report was a letter from Carmen Marino and Deborah Naiman to the East Cleveland Police Department. And it said that they heard that we was trying to get the police reports, and that is not public records. So they ordered not to give it to us. They ordered to send everything that they got pertaining to our case to the prosecutor's office, or they would be prosecuted. Like, that was like as soon as I got that police report, like, I feel like I didn't really even have to read the rest of it. If this came from the prosecutor to the police, you know, that saying this, that is not public record, like, I couldn't believe it. But then as I read on, like, it was just like so much other things in there that proved our innocence. But like, that alone was just, it was a lot. And, you know, in the process of us going to trial, they kept trying to get me and my friend Derek to testify against Eugene, to say he done it. And like, they came to me like several times with this plea of just say Eugene done it. You know, you could walk out the door right now. You go home and be with your family. But I couldn't do that. Like, I couldn't lie to send my friend to prison for something I know he didn't do. Like, my conscience would have ate me alive. Like, just to try to save myself, and I know we didn't do anything. And for me to go through something like that at such a young age, I wonder how the police and the prosecutors and them kind of people, knowing you sending innocent people to prison, how do you go home and sleep at night like that and have a sense of peace? Like, that just made no sense to me.
It's really shocking. Thank you, Laurice. Let me throw out another piece of information here. Innocent people, Black people, are more likely to be wrongfully convicted, and this also varies by charge, research finds. If you take a look at the infographic I'm showing, you can see these differences. Most staggering is that the best evidence we have on drug use in this nation, the best research and data, shows that African Americans and whites use illegal drugs at about the same rate. Nonetheless, African Americans are about 5 times as likely to go to prison for drug possession as whites. And judging from the exoneration data, innocent Black people are about 12 times more likely to be convicted of drug crimes than innocent white people. Robert McClendon was convicted 1991 in Columbus based on eyewitness testimony of the victim, whose eyes, by the way, were covered during the assault, and spent 17 years in prison before DNA exoneration in August 2008. Robert, as a black man, you were 3.5 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted than a white person. Can you tell us a little bit about your case and what this abstract number means to you?
Hello?
She just asked you a question. That's all. Maybe she should repeat the question.
And so I said, Rob, as a black man, you were 3.5 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted than a white person. Please share a little bit about your case and what this abstract number means in your life. Maybe he has. Okay. So you know what? Maybe we go on and we check in with Rob a little later.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
Hello?
Yes. Rob, are you here?
Yeah, but I can't hardly hear.
Okay. I just asked you to share about your story. You were, as a black guy, you were 3.5 times more likely to be convicted. It's an abstract number. What does that mean to you, and what is your story?
Yes. Well, my situation. Just 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, very well.
Okay. I agree that with what you said about racism. My situation was misidentification, which we now know that results in 85% of people being convicted of crimes, rape and murder. But racism affects us in a lot of different ways, in prison and out of prison. It affected me while I was in prison, and it most certainly affects us when we're out of prison as well. One of the things that I wanted to touch on when Reese was talking about how can those guys sleep at night and knowing that they sent innocent people to prison. Well, another thing is, what about the people that actually did it? You know, I mean, that knife cuts both ways. You're sending people to prison that didn't do it, but at the same time, knowing that there are people out there that actually did these crimes that's walking around free and probably still are. So, wow.
You said that race affected you even in prison. Can you tell a little bit about that?
Yes. When you're in prison, they categorize people in prison: blacks, whites. You have white supremacists that are in prison. You have officers that are in prisons that live in rural areas. Okay, that's never really been around people, black people, other than black people in prison. So they're racist and prejudiced. Okay, and we're treated as such. Okay, that means that they say that prison is a microcosm of society, which means that if we're strongly accused of things out in society, then it's the same thing in prison. They'll shake down your cell, tear your cell up. They will, if your people come to visit you, they will take them through a whole lot of changes about their dress code, or make them go all the way out and buy different clothes because to them they're not dressed appropriately, but to another white person, they don't do the same thing. Black people in prison are signaled out more so than white people in prison in terms of in sports, what they dress, how they talk, all kinds of things. gangs is a serious problem in prison, and they're always quick to associate people with being in a gang, especially if you stand up for yourself or you talk not aggressively, but talk like you know what you're talking about. They will associate you with a gang, and once they tag you as a gang member, then they focus on you all the time, and they can increase your security level. They can put you in a hole. They can put you in. I mean, it's bad. It just doesn't stop with society. It also happens in prison as well, because like I said before, a lot of the officers and staff members in prison grew up in rural areas, and they haven't come in contact with blacks, and they have stereotypical views of black men.
Wow, Rob, 17 years. Thank you. We'll come back to you. I show you another slide here.
Okay.
So murder convictions of black exonerees are 22% more likely to include police misconduct. Police misconduct now is widely discussed. It does not surprise us. It's very out and open. And the prior slide already showed you that judging from exonerations, innocent black people are about 7 times more likely to be convicted of murder than innocent white people. Now, 40% of defendants imprisoned for murder are African American, but they account for 50% of murder exonerations. Yeah, including 53% of those who were sentenced to death. Unless some unknown and improbable process gives innocent black convicts a big advantage in obtaining exonerations, that means that African American prisoners who were convicted of murder are about 50% more likely to be innocent than other convicted murderers. So also, the convictions that led to murder exonerations with the black defendants were 22% more likely to include misconduct by police officers. And Rob alluded to misconduct by correctional staff, yeah, also. Ruel Saylor was convicted of murder in Cleveland in 2003 and was one of those who was not even present at the murder scene. He spent 15 years behind bars. Ruel, tell us a little bit about your case.
How you all doing? I was wrongfully convicted for aggravated murder that a best friend of mine had committed. He was with another gentleman, and by me and him being best friends since like elementary school, 3rd grade, all the way up, it was a vice cop in my neighborhood when I was in the streets, and he always had it out for me and my best friend. So when my best friend name came about in this murder, he just automatically just threw me in the frying pan and said that, well, this guy was there, Real had to be there with him. There was 2 suspects, I'm pretty sure Real said was there. Came up with a false informant, saying an informant told him that I was there and that I was the shooter. This informant wasn't even there. They took that hearsay, they arrested me, and I was arrested like April 2nd. I was in trial the middle of May. I was convicted in June, just that fast, like 28 years. And race played a big part in my case, because it was all about identification. Each witness that was there at night, the crime happened at 12:30 at midnight on the side street. Every witness there said that it was 2 light-skinned individuals that came and left. The shooter was light-skinned, the passenger was light-skinned, and then you have me sitting there, and I'm like, ain't nobody paying attention that I'm not light-skinned at all, especially not at night. I couldn't have been light-skinned at all. Like, my best friend, he lighter than Robert. He like Steph Curry complexion. They think that we brothers and look alike. But by us having an all-white prosecutors, all-white, like not all-white jury, but nine jurors was white, nowhere near my side of town or my area, my background or my culture. So they didn't understand about how important light skin and dark skin was in description. They knew it was 2 African American males. That's how most Caucasians describe us as people, they African American. They don't say light skin or dark skin because they're not from our culture or our background. And that played a big part in me being convicted. And I was sentenced to 28 years to life. And I just fought. My co-defendant, he admitted to the crime in 2003 in court, and the judge still sentenced me, still sent me to prison. And I fought hard. And like 2015, the guy that was with him came forward, admitted that he was there, admitted that my co-defendant had shot and killed the victim. I was nowhere near it. The main star witness in the case came back and recanted, said that he lied on me, never saw me a day in his life. The police told him to say that I did it, and they still had me in prison. I didn't get released till like almost a year later after all that. And my case is somewhat similar to the Reese case because we couldn't get my police report. The Innocence Project couldn't get it. My lawyers couldn't get it. And just so happened, my wife called the clerk of courts and was looking for something else. This is how God works. She was calling about something else. And the lady sent her my police file by mistake. And it had all kind of reports in there that we never saw before. This vice cop that had framed me, he had made a police statement, a report. They never came out in court. They never gave it to us. And so during trial, they had asked me where was my co-defendant at the night of the murder. And I had said he was in the bar. I kind of embellished because I knew he had left, but I felt as though that wasn't my job to tell them that he had left the bar that night because I didn't do nothing. I wasn't supposed to be here, so that was their job. And I neglected to tell them that my best friend had left the bar that night. So when they came to me for my freedom, they came and was like, well, we know you didn't commit the murder. We know you wasn't there. You've been here all these years, but you lied and said that you didn't know your best friend had left the bar. And you want to go home today, you have to admit that you lied, and we're going to give you 10 years time served for lying, and that's how you'll be able to go home. And so I had to just take 10 years time served, not really for lying, but not just giving them what they wanted to know. And they gave me 10 years time served, and I came home. Since I've been home, I've just been speaking up for other individuals wrongfully convicted. I've been to rallies and different court hearings, and me and Larice been all on October 2nd, just October 2nd, Wrongful Conviction Day, we had a rally downtown in front of our courthouse for the guys that don't have a voice.
Yes, and you know what? I'm so grateful to all four of you that you are speaking about this and that you are out there, that you are speaking to our students, that you are educating the public and really fill in what that means. Systemic racism. I mean, you touch on several points. You say the police basically had it out for you. We know that from research that Black neighborhoods are policed in a way more massively, where we have more police presence, we have more arrests. We know from research that you, Ruel, have not gotten a jury of peers. You say this was white jurors. They have no clue about your life. We know that African American jurors are actively hindered from participating in their jury duty, no? And that all plays out and has shaped your life. And thank you for coming out after all these traumas and still not being tired to share that story, yeah?
No, because I just feel like if we don't share our stories, it'll keep going. It'll keep repeating, even though it still is repeating itself. But the more we continue to share our stories, the more people will start being more easily involved than shying away from it. Because right now we dealing with people that's like, that ain't my family. I ain't got nothing to do with that. Until it happens at home, and now everybody want to get involved. What we trying to do is get everybody involved before that happens. Before it is your cousin or your brother, get you involved now.
That's a good point.
Wonderful.
That's a good point. That's a good point, El. And another thing that we need to do, we need to start participating in the jury process. A lot of people that I know don't want to be on the jury because they don't pay you nothing. You got to take off words and everything. But at the same time, you look on those juries and all you see is white people on the jury. Mm-hmm. And you know, you should have an idea what it is. Okay, you don't have nobody on the jury that represents you, or nobody on that jury that can relate to your circumstances, or is going to look at the evidence, you know, objectively. Then it is what it is.
Yeah, it's real. Like I feel as though like the jury should be picked upon first, like somewhat of the victim, somewhat of the suspects, and then somewhat of the nature of the crime. Like the nature of my case is built upon like drugs. Like my best friend's sister, she was using PCP, and the people on my jury never heard of PCP, don't know the effects of it, nothing about it at all. So it's like they didn't understand what was going on when this guy that smoked PCP 10 minutes before the crime, he's giving a detailed statement of everything that happened that night. And it's like, how can you do that if you have PCP? But somebody that knows the effect of that drug would be like, he couldn't have known or even remembered what happened that night that clearly. But if you don't know the effects of that drug, you can't even say that. Like, so it's like, I think the jury should be broke down better. It should be more like culture, backgrounds, things of that nature. Because I had 9 African-American jurors on my case, the first thing somebody would have said is, dude not light-skinned, why he even here? I wouldn't even have been in the courtroom.
Yeah. That is
right, bro. Right.
And it shows also the system. No? It's not one. This has a lot of factors. It starts with police, the prosecutor, the jury. There is a lot of moving parts, and in every part we have racial bias. That's what I'm gathering from your stories so far. I have a second to last slide to share with you. Because also you guys spend a long time in prison. No? You gave up decades of your life. So, and what we find is that black exonerees spend 45% longer in prison than white exonerees. And you just said that, Rael, that you were still incarcerated almost a year, no? After it was already clear you are innocent. So innocent black murder suspects, especially those who are falsely convicted, are additional victims, basically, of murders that are committed by others. And that has also been touched upon by Rob, I think. And those who have been exonerated spent on average more than 14 years in prison before they were released. 14 years. Many more have not been exonerated at all, no? And are still sitting in prison, and more often than not, they will.
I would like to know why on that. I would like to know why on that, because my question would be, first of all, who's exonerating? We know that there's other people besides the Innocent Project that exonerate people wrongfully convicted, and I wonder if this is just a number thing, or if this has to do anything with race, because if it has to do with anything with race, I don't believe that the Innocent Project will be guilty of anything like that. That's why I would like, if possible, to know a little bit more about the numbers, or what does that mean, or what does the evidence into that look like?
Yes, I don't have this info at hand, but I think we have a great panelist, Janae, might be able to talk a little bit about maybe whiteness within the innocence movement. So, but before we address that, let me give the word to Raymond Towler.
Okay.
Because Raymond spent the longest amount of time behind bars, 29 years, without having committed anything wrong before he got exonerated in May 2010. He was only 24 when he was convicted. Raymond, can you share a little bit of your story, of your perspective?
Well, my perspective is, like you said, I was 24. I was trying to figure out exactly what I wanted to do, with the rest of my life as a professional. I've always had the interest in painting and music. So, but I was actually kind of struggling which one should I focus on, because either one of them at that time wasn't making enough money to like say, okay, I'm a musician, I'm a truck driver, all that stuff. I've kind of looked at it. So here I'm in the crossroads of my life, trying to figure everything out. I came from the military. I did a 2-year stint in the military, and honored the 4 years reserve. So, I was kind of feeling like, I should be able to do whatever I want to do in the world, in the country. So, I kind of did. That's how my conduct was, not somebody that was looking to break the law or nothing. So one day, because of my settlement and all that kind of stuff, I'm not going to say the names or who the entity was. But I'll just say an officer came up to me and told me, "We don't like your kind around here." So, just face to face, eye to eye. I was told that, but I was young, healthy. I wasn't thinking of like, okay, I'm a black man in America, because I wasn't, I was kind of ignorant of that. Even though I kind of been to Germany a little bit, and, I've been, down to Texas, I've been around the country a little bit, but, it's it wasn't the same. It wasn't embedded in me or burned into me like it is now. That racism does exist. It's there. It's real. It's not in everyone, thank God. Even just stopping there just for a second, I'm so thankful that I did run into the Innocent Project, and the continued thought of that, from 2004, I guess, is when I was really first contacted, till now with guys like Pierce and Janae. I could keep on going, and then the exonerees themselves have been a big lift, and not that I'm glad that somebody went through what I went through, but it's to see people who can hang in there and not give up on something that's hard. And that's what these, other panelists, that's what they represent too. Even you got to solve a problem first by not giving up on the problem, whatever it is. I think that's something that we can all hang on to. And that's what I try to, I don't look at the fact that racism is here, just like I said, it's alive. I don't try to let it stop me from doing the things that I want to do. I just know that's part of that hurdle I got to jump over. Maybe that's an inch. In some situations, that hurdle might be, even look insurmountable. But, I'm just trying to work with everybody and try to heal some of the hurt that's been, put out by this, because I think if we can keep passing on this message, thanks to, Danny and people like you, that it doesn't have to be, racism really doesn't have to exist, if we all know about each other. And I think that's really the main thing. Just like when Robert was saying, all these people from the rural kind of, it's kind of a stereotype, but it still is true. It's people up on the top of the hill who are just as isolated from, other people's lives. And they probably don't even feel like they need to care, and so they don't, this that level of person too. So I just try to keep doing positive stuff that I can. That's my answer to racism. It's everywhere, because I grew up on it, Laurice and Ruel can probably agree with me when they say I was the West Side guy in Cleveland. I grew up around Spanish people, Puerto Rican people, 75% white people. Went to graduated from John Marshall. But actually, that's where it was starting to be apparent there when I got to that age and that level of high school. Oh yeah, okay. People I wasn't in the busing era, but I seen why they needed busing and they went toward that. So I grew up around it, and I have friends of every, spectrum. And I'm just glad that it isn't in me. or if it is, I'm open to hear it. Why is it? Why isn't it? That's all I can say.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Raymond. And thank you for also bringing up that you are a painter, because if you saw that gorgeous flyer.
That's what I'm sitting here.
Oh, look at that. I didn't see that. Exactly. Please look at this. This is Pierce chose the image Raymond did for the flyer, and also music. And I feel like you say you want to be a part of the healing. And I wonder if your art, your music, and your painting, is this a healing strategy for yourself?
Oh, for myself, actually, absolutely. I think it's the reason I kind of stopped. I didn't have a quick answer for that because it's kind of like at an early age, I just felt that, man, you got to draw something. There's a pencil and there's something to draw on, a wall, whatever. And so I'm pretty sure I did that. But to stop that, my mom was smart enough to just give me a piece of paper with a pencil or whatever it is. And then I kind of got on, that, I can draw. So it was like a gift to me that I have to use. And the music is pretty much the same way because I got a radio playing in my head all the time, All I got to do is turn the station and there I got, live music. And me learning an instrument, that way I can share that music with you best I can anyway. And the way what I want to help is I started through the help of a lot of good people, Alec Beresin, Pierce, and Mark Gossi. I can mention a whole lot of names right now, but the name of it is Ex Freedom Housing Group. And what I want to do is actually, now that I've been working on it, what I really need is the housing group to be a construction company. And how we want to get started is through donations to Ex Freedom Housing Group to either rehab, build, or, through whatever means necessary with the help of the community, homes to the exonerees that get out, the homes for actually to people who need it, But of course, my heart is with the OIP and the Innocent Project, because here I am, because of, God that led me toward them. So that's kind of my mission right now, and even with that, I'd like to be an example against racism because it doesn't have to be a black exoneree or a veteran that gets, the housing when we get it for them. Well, I do have one house. We have one house, I should say. It's going to be whoever needs it. And, that's as part of the message, we have to be the message, not just say the message, when people look at us and, our lives and everything, and that's what they would get, you don't have to say it. Just look. But we want to make noise to make people look. So there you go. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Raymond. You're an amazing example. I will pester you, audience, with the last slide.
Not to give Robert Raymond his flowers right now for what he's doing for these guys. Like, you know what I'm saying? I just want to thank you, me personally, Raymond, for what you're doing, man.
Yeah.
It doesn't go unnoticed.
But thank you. Yeah.
And if you have any, we are happy to take your links. If you take donations, we can put a link on our event website. And this is another way every one of us can get active. Yeah, we all can do something because there is this state, systemic racism. We are trapped. No, we all can do a little bit.
We all can.
Donating to Raymond's Housing Initiative is one way.
Well, what I can say on that is we're working on a website. It hasn't been open yet, but I can direct all that information to whoever wants to donate or know more about it. Direct their searches to OIP, and Pierce here can provide you, Danny. I'm pretty sure. Pierce? Yeah. Pierce can do everything. He can do everything, whatever you need.
He can do everything.
Him and Katie.
I actually think that Pierce is an extraterrestrial life form because he seems to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Doesn't need sleep.
There is something very suspicious about this, but also really good outcomes. So, so far we have been talking about wrongful convictions and race, but implicitly we have also been talking about gender because all our 4 panelists are guys, right? And I want to bring up a very important Black legal scholar, Kimberly Crenshaw. You probably have heard about her. She coined the most influential concept in feminist theory, I want to say, in the last 30 years, intersectionality. And what that means is that she came to thinking in looking at Black women in the criminal justice system, how not only race, but also gender shapes us, and class, how different identity markers are intersecting and are placing us in the social system, sometimes more privileged, sometimes more oppressed. And it's not just a doubling up of oppressions, it's a very complex multidimensional space. And if we look at gender, and the wonderful Pierce has just yesterday pulled up an article about gender, race, and exonerations. We will be linking to that on the event website. It's not on there yet. And interestingly, it shows that really proportionately less women are exonerated. Women make up a very small portion of exonerees, and it's even more pronounced, the pattern, if we look at Black women. Women of color make up over half of the female state and federal prison population, so they are overrepresented in the prison system, but only 35% of female exonerees. So there is something there, yeah? An intersectional experience of oppression and powerlessness. However, Kimberly Crenshaw is a kick-ass feminist Black scholar, and so is Janae Powell, a former legal fellow of the Ohio Innocence Project. She is a JD candidate at the University of Cincinnati College of Law in her 3rd year. She just said in the beginning she's a public speaker and writer, and also pursues a graduate degree in professional writing. And I'm really intrigued by her holistic approach to law. And she has publicly spoken about the role of the lawyer as presenter, advocate, storyteller. So I'm really looking forward to you, Janae. Tell us a little bit about your experience in the Innocence organization as a Black woman. And tell us everything you want to tell us.
Okay, that's broad. First, I just really want to thank you, Dr. Falk and Pierce and everybody that's working behind the scenes to put this on today. And of course, to my fellow panelists, I was taking notes as you all were speaking, and you really did an excellent job of informing of what I'm about to say and share with you all. So what brought me to the Innocence movement, like Larissa was saying, until you kind of have a moment where you have specific experiences, I didn't really have a whole context in terms of wrongful conviction, or even knowing that, there's innocence organizations dedicated to this very issue kind of popping up, all over the country. For me, growing up, I always kind of had an affinity for true crime. My favorite show was America's Most Wanted. And as I kind of progressed through my formative years, I started to realize that I had a real passion and sensitivity for racial issues and race relations in this country. That was also largely due to my upbringing. I was raised by all Black women, so my identity has always been super salient for me. My was raised, spent a lot of time with my grandmother, raised by my grandmother in part, and she was born and raised for a little bit in Little Rock, Arkansas, and grew up picking cotton. So I've always kind of had this idea, and the intersection of those two, my upbringing and kind of this realization about my passions, once I decided to go to law school, at the point where I applied to be a fellow for OIP, I still was very green. I had only had a semester and like a quarter or something of law school at that point. But knowing that, Black and brown people are more heavily or disproportionately impacted by the criminal legal system in this country, and with my passion about race relations and really figuring that stuff out, in conjunction with my upbringing, I felt like the OIP was going to be the best place for me to kind of start. And I'm super thankful and super grateful for it having been my launching pad. It's going to inform everything that I do from this point on. And working in that post-conviction context was really amazing because you can really see everything, from the arrest to after all the appeals have been exhausted. And now that I'm doing public defense work, I'm working in the East Bay area at a public defender's office. You can start to see how these things, start to materialize, the racism, the prejudice, how these things all kind of play a role as people, kind of move through the criminal legal system. So I guess I can talk about, did you want me to address like whiteness, I guess?
Yes, if you want to address that, because, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you all, and thank you to the audience out there for being with us today too and listening. So all these concepts are super layered. So I'm going to do my best to kind of explain some stuff if there's definitions that I come up against, and also, weave my own experience in there. So, Black women, I think, as a whole, are only 2% or something like that of attorneys nationally. So we are really, really a minority, and that's reflected also at law schools across the nation. I'm fortunate enough to be at the University of Cincinnati, which is really in effect now led by a team of Black women. We have Jean Williams, who is the first Black dean at the college, and it's nearly 200-year history. Our dean of admissions is a Black woman. Dean of students is a Black woman. So that was really one of the catalysts for me choosing the university. However, representation is so important, but it doesn't really exempt, us from any of the larger systemic issues that still take place, because we're still operating in, a legal system, a country that was founded on slavery, and really, in effect, is inherently racist. I know that that's kind of like a jarring statement, but once you start participating and kind of understanding, your own role in society, you know that it's in everything. It's extremely pervasive. So when it comes to whiteness within the innocence movement, and I think wrongful conviction is kind of, we've talked about it, and I think that's kind of explanatory. We have Black and brown folks that are disproportionately impacted by this, phenomenon. But, because the legal system is predominantly white and male, these are the leaders and these are the catalysts for a lot of these movements. And, we wouldn't have a lot of these organizations if it wasn't for systemic racism. The things that we have in place now are really to rectify and correct, issues of racism as a whole, So my experience, I remember, walking in and I think the first thing, or walking in to do my interview, I'll return to this in just a second. But I think for me, the first thing that comes to mind, and I think for a lot of people in the context of innocence movement or innocence projects, is the idea of white saviorship. And so basically that's the idea that, we have white people as the dominant group in society. And it's now also their role, or they feel compelled in certain contexts, to kind of rescue or save Black and brown people from their circumstance. And 10 times out of 10, that circumstance is tied some way to systemic racism and, you know, how things ended up being manifested over the years. So I think the iterations of whiteness and that kind of ideology of white saviorship, they're myriad, first and foremost, and people don't really think about, especially white folks. I don't think that sometimes there's really a thought about how these things get displayed. And so optics is one of those things, right? So, you know, in recent years, you can kind of see with all these efforts for diversity and inclusion, like, let's get a Black person in the pamphlet. Like, let's get a Latinx identified person in the pamphlet. And it happens in real life situations too. So as I was saying before, with my interview, I was super nervous. I'm this little Black girl from California in the Midwest, still, you know, trying to adjust culturally too, because that was even another part for me that I had as a Black woman. I had to kind of reassess, you know, the way I was perceived and the way I was representing myself in accordance with my own identity. And so when I went in to interview for the OIP, I walked in and it was in a small conference room on the main level of the school. And there's 5 white attorneys at this long conference table, and there's little Black me walking in. And so that optic and that experience in and of itself was like, oh my God, you know, and then it's a 2-pronged process. So then I go up and I have a second interview with students who are also all white folks. And, you know, it's through no fault of their own. They're not thinking like, oh, you know, this may be intimidating, because everybody, when you apply, you get an interview. But in that context, I kind of just walked away thinking like, the message that is kind of sent by setups like that is, you know, I'm walking in here and I know that mass incarceration is a problem in this country. I know that Black and brown people, one of which is part of my identity. You know, I'm walking into this situation. I have to prove to white people on some level or measure that I'm worthy to help people that look like me. And so it kind of gives you this level of cognitive dissonance, because you're like, okay, I'm doing really great work. And I think that's for everybody that's involved in is participating in these systems. I'm doing this really, really great work. But I also have things that are causing me trouble. It's giving me some pause, making me think like, how do I feel about that? I don't know if I feel, you know, so great about that. So moving forward, as a part of our training, you know, the book Blind Injustice is rightfully lauded, you know, in many Innocence Network, within the Innocence Network and across movements. And we were assigned to read, you know, parts of that as incoming fellows. And there's a part in there in the kind of introductory section of the book that declines to talk about race within the text. And I just remember, you know, reading that, because my cohort, I think we had 5 Black identified individuals, myself included. And then over the summer, we also had some folks that, you know, came in from abroad. So we were a pretty diverse cohort, especially in the Midwest, in a law school, since, you know, OIP was founded in 2003. So, I mean, it had been some time, I think, since they saw, you know, some folks of color really, you know, in the organization, and at least represented at those numbers. And it's still only 5 out of 22 or however many my cohort was. But I remember thinking, I'm like, you know, the very genesis of, as I was saying earlier, you don't have a lot of these organizations or any of these things to rectify these symptoms of systemic racism if systemic racism wasn't an issue in the first place, if it wasn't the primary issue, you know, in the first place. So in terms of white saviorship, one of the iterations, not only is it optics, but it's also how privilege gets displayed. I'm sure a lot of folks on here, and we can talk about this at length in another or later on, whenever, but, you know, white privilege is one of those iterations. To decline to talk about race in a book that is based upon exploring the innocence movement and telling these folks stories, of which, you know, as we just heard from my fellow panelists, race is absolutely a factor. And not only that, but, 90, I forget what the figure is, but, at least 90-something% of our exonerees are Black men from the Ohio Innocence Project. To make a decision to not say or to decline to talk about race in that context is just an iteration of privilege, So things kind of, get say is that for during that have been exonerated. I think I see opportunity to speak to a guy here who was an attorney with this project, and we kind of identified some common themes that we see. And one of those things, or two of those things, are labor and identity as it pertains to Black exonerees. Often you'll see. Can everybody hear me?
I can.
Yes.
Not too loud, but it's been like that all day with mine. But I can hear you though.
I can hear you.
Yes.
You kind of froze a little bit for a second, but yeah, she's gone now.
I regret.
Yes.
Well, until Shanae is coming back, the floor is now open. The floor is open for the panelists. If you want to add something to that, the floor is open for all our attendees to throw out questions in the chat.
No, here she is. Can I jump in with something right quick?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
About the book, I kind of admit I didn't read the book. I know, I think I know Mark Gotze very well. And I think he is dealing with racism as he can. It almost goes back to what I was saying. It's not what you say, it's about what you do. And that's strong enough for me, for him, just speaking up for him. And I cannot say anything bad about the guy. And maybe, everybody needs, to push a little harder sometime, maybe, so I'm not saying what Janae is saying is wrong. I'm just trying to speak up for Mark. Whenever I can, I'll speak up for those who I believe, need that, and I can say that about all these guys, they're, very, very strong, and it's a high level of camaraderie here too, and not just faking it as far as lying for anybody, because that's the good thing about it. We don't have to, make up any stories for each other. We just kind of, speak the truth behind, if there's any question.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Raymond. And I just want to clarify in response to that. I'm going to talk in generalizations. I've had Mark Gotze as a professor. I serve on a committee with him now. So I just want to be clear. I want to be as transparent with relation to these phenomena, that I've seen in my time as a fellow. And how I think they kind of have informed my experience, which I'll get to just a second. But, at the start of my fellowship, I'll admit, that was jarring to me. And it really, it was a foundation. It was kind of like, it was the foundation for, what kind of followed. With respect to my experience within the Ohio Innocence Project, and kind of like this, as I was talking about earlier, this kind of cognitive dissonance that you have, and I also want to say, also, as I mentioned earlier, I'm from California, from the Bay Area. Coming to Ohio, coming to Cincinnati, just across the river from Kentucky, was a huge, huge adjustment for me. Not only just in culture, but in terms of Blackness too. I really had to take, and I think I might be laying the foundation for something else later on, but, you know, for me as a Black woman, and especially with the demographics of Ohio being so much more starkly Black and white, I was realizing that I was being perceived differently. I'm a Black woman with biracial ancestry, and that latter part has never really played a huge, you know, factor in how I identify or how I carry myself. But all of a sudden, in a different context, it did, you know, because I was having to re-examine privilege in the way that I was presenting myself in a different field, in a different state, you know, all of those things. I think what the last couple things I was going to say just about whiteness in this piece, was watching as a fellow. I don't know if you all heard this part, so I'll repeat, but I had the opportunity to speak recently with a former staff attorney from the New Orleans Innocence Project, and she's a white woman, and it was really an awesome, she's a colleague out here actually now. It was really an awesome experience for us to kind of commiserate and identify some of these things that, again, were the source of that cognitive dissonance. You know, really proud of the work that you're doing. You know, you enjoy being a part of something that has such intense meaning and purpose and is necessary work. But, you know, there also are these pieces that you're like, oh, I don't know, you know, maybe that's a flaw that can be improved upon. The two common threads that we kind of spoke about were labor and identity. For the latter part, I think what we see a lot of the time, or at least the way that it comes off to me, is that when we have exonerees coming back to speak and share about their experiences, and I just want to qualify this, that I know exonerees, many of them, I don't know about all of them, you know, really find this therapeutic, that they're able to do this, and I do think there's a very necessary and imperative part of being able to obviously storytell and, you know, make sure everything is out in the open. But it's almost like, you know, the identity of these folks, their individual identities kind of get lost in the fact that they're an exoneree. And you see that sometimes when people are asking questions, if they're coming to work or speak at fundraisers or events or whatever it is. You know, sometimes one of the things we talked about, sometimes people ask really off the wall kind of things that are like, you know, it kind of reshapes their humanity and their identity so that you just see them as this person who was in prison for this really, really long amount of time, instead of someone who, you know, was able to get out of prison and is now living this, you know, totally independent life with the ability now to chase dreams and do things that they didn't have the ability to before, you know. And sometimes that looks like while they're speaking, being interrupted to talk about some of the more traumatic parts of their stories, instead of, you know, just giving them the full floor to express it how they want to express it. And then, you know, the other thing just about the labor part, I would say, you know, this country, because it was founded partly on the genocide of the indigenous folks, and then, you know, also the other main half being built on the backs of slaves and slavery as an institution itself, you know, it's really hard to get away from, almost impossible to really get away from the foundation that's laid, because this is still a relatively young country. And one of those things is, you know, the labor. Like, Black people were primarily at the genesis, you know, the United States, we were a labor force. And so in a microcosmic example, as Rob was saying earlier, how prison is a microcosm of society, you know, you find microcosmic examples everywhere. And so, you know, one of the things that I was noticing, you know, Black exonerees, of course, they're, you know, more numerous, but most of the folks that we had come back to speak to us, and really be involved in some of these events. I mean, at everything, you know, are Black exonerees. And so that kind of ties in with the identity piece, you know. I remember the first time I heard Ricky Jackson speak, and it was sublime for me. And I was so completely honored, and my life was enriched by hearing him speak. But then I also had this piece in the back of my mind, like, you know, there's, you know, sometimes there's issues with things that you don't necessarily, you know how to put your finger on. But yeah, so, you know, I think the last thing I'll say is just that for my experience as a fellow personally, you know, this country was designed so that, you know, Black folks and brown folks, we were never really supposed to be on the other side of the table. You know, the lawyers, the judges, all these institutions were always supposed to be primarily white men. And then later on, you know, white women are folks of the white race. And so when I'm still, you know, when I'm operating in these environments, if I want to speak to my client using African-American vernacular English, for instance, Ebonics, to build a sense of camaraderie, to build a sense of community. You know, I have colleagues that are looking at me like, is that professional? I don't know if you should be doing that. You know what I'm saying? And then on top of that, we're also dealing with, you know, which everybody deals with, but levels of imposter syndrome and feeling like, am I as well equipped to do this job as possible? And it only adds on to it if you're also fielding, you know, microaggressions or people questioning, do you know what you're doing? Because we also have these stereotypes that come into play that Black people are just, or Black and brown folks, or anybody of color, are not as adept, or they don't take initiative, or they're not as skilled as their white counterparts. And so it's really kind of a tough balancing. I'm looking to my right here. And then, you know, the end of this year, I just finished my tenure as a fellow in May, and it culminated in me chairing the first OIP Diversity and Inclusion Committee because of some of the things that I was seeing and talking with the other Black identified fellows. You know, a committee was formed to kind of rectify those things. Our charge was to put together a framework to improve that for fellows, you know, in the future. And I think it speaks volumes that, you know, from 2003 onward to 2019, 2020, you know, that was something that this was like it was the first time that they had really considered, you know, how do we make the environment better for folks that in the history of this country weren't supposed to be here in the first place anyway. So.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yes, I'm so glad we have a recording because there is so much. Your statement is so rich, and thank you. And thank you. And I've talked with Piers in the beginning because we both have women of color friends, and it was in the wake of this because I'm white, yeah, and it's uncomfortable sometimes to talk about. Not sometimes, it's uncomfortable to talk about race, yeah, and I don't feel like I know enough, and I don't know how to approach it, and it's awkward. But we have to have those discussions. But then again. And I also have girlfriends who say, don't be coming to me as a woman of color to take care of you, right? It is not my responsibility to educate you right now and to direct you to research. You do your homework, you listen, and you find your education in that. And so I find it extra amazing how much time and thought you're putting into your work and into this committee leadership, into this event to educate people like me who grew up in privilege.
It's really my honor. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Okay, the floor is still open. All panelists, if you have comments, all attendees, if you have comments or questions, throw them out.
They all muted. They talking.
Uh-huh. Yes, but they can use the chat function.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm not seeing anything. I mean, I only see one comment.
Can you guys hear anything? Because I just want to
please, Raymond.
Okay. I just wanted to thank people like Janae, for being, like where she is, because that's an answer to, that's a solution to this problem of us going to court, and it's, all the judges, all the lawyers, the bailiff, everybody is not like us, whoever we are. It's written like that, a jury of our peers, but it's rarely like that. So, we need people to actually start from education, start very young, and know that it's a path, to that, and it's a career. It's you can feed your family and grow another you. So thank you, Janae, for all that you brought today. It's just very well put.
So much, Raymond, and thank you too.
We just have a question, please.
But to speak on what you speak on, like I go, well, not now, but before when I got out, I went to a lot of colleges, high schools, junior high schools, and like Job Corps for younger African American teenagers. And I always ask them to tell them, encourage them, like, don't just, a lot of people think that they have to be a lawyer to change the system. And I'm like, no, the narrative is we need y'all to be prosecutors and judges to change the system, because it's so biased and it's so uneven that the more of us, more our background, our culture, start studying law and take up to be prosecutors and judges, we can level the playing field just a little bit. But the only way we're going to change the system is by infiltrating their circle first with their own system. You know what I'm saying? And get in there. And if it's more of us in there, then not more of us, not more than them, but at least a nice percentage, we can have a voice in that system. Where it's like, if something not right, we can speak up, and we have somebody behind us to back us up, because there's more of us there. Right now, it's so small. Prosecutors as African American or from certain backgrounds, certain areas, that they scared to speak up because they don't have nobody behind them. But when you get more of us into the office, and then it's like, hey, this is not right. This guy couldn't have done this crime, or this guy don't match that description, or this guy couldn't have did this. And then you got 3 or 4 guys in the same office or females behind you, like, he right. Then it changed the narrative just a little bit, and it starts to grow. But I definitely encourage a lot of my younger teenagers that I go speak to in schools, don't just think about being a defense lawyer. Like, we need more prosecutors and judges so people can start speaking up more. But I want to thank you, Janae, for everything you said today, too.
Right.
Super well. We have Denisha from the audience says we must vote. And I saw Denisha earlier stated that they never served on a jury, but there is an awareness that jury duty is made very difficult for people of color and with a non-normative ethnic background. We have a question from Julia, and she says, what can we tell people who don't believe that systemic racism exists or is a big problem? I'm throwing this out to you. What should we tell people? We show them these infographics of today.
Paris, where you at, man? You haven't said anything yet.
Oh, she can have a conversation with her friends. Here's what I'm glad of. When you look at the Floyd case, I think we're doing better, and we're going to be okay, because when you start seeing as many white people as black people that was protesting for unjust and racism, that gives me hope. That really gives me hope. And not only was it here in America, but it was all over. It was all over the world. People were protesting, and we need more of that, because we didn't get here where we are now alone. There was white people that marched along with Martin Luther King, Jesse Jackson, and all. And if you still pay attention, if you look, there's a lot of white folks that are still standing up for us and with us. I'm proud of that. Could we do better? Yes, we can do better. But I think that if there's white people out there that think that there's not systemic racism, then they're not paying attention. They can't be paying attention because it is.
Mm-hmm.
I would just, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you. Is that okay? Is that a period? All right. Danisha, I think, asked the question.
Julia, but that's fine. Yeah.
That's it, I'm sorry. Julia, I'm sorry. Well, hello to you both. I would say, for folks that don't believe in systemic racism, or that it's an occurrence that's happening all around us. I mean, there's really, and this may be a little cynical, so feel free to push back or take what is pertinent and leave the rest. But, in my view, if they're denying the existence of something that's so obviously salient and clear, it's literally what this country was founded on, and they're kind of, for lack of a better phrase, a lost cause. I think if we focus on, educating the folks and improving allyship for the folks that do see what's happening, that do want to help but may not have an idea of where to start, that's really where we need to focus our efforts are, because it's going to be a lot more work, and everybody can't educate everybody. Some of that has to be, on the self, In my little soundbite, I thought a lot about allyship and the role that education plays in that. And like you were saying, Professor Yao, earlier, you have friends of color, women of color who say, it's not on me, go educate yourself. And that's exactly right. I think that, the focus really needs to be on more self-initiative and understanding that allyship is not self-assigned. And this is purely my own assessment in the way that I've been thinking about it. Allyship is not self-assigned. It's not static. So you should expect it to change depending on what you're doing and the actions that you're taking. And lastly, it requires action. At once upon a time, I'll just use myself as an example. I'm constantly striving to be an ally to the LGBTQ plus community. But I also recognize that there are times where I wouldn't have been considered that way. And again, it's not up to me to say whether I am or not. I just know that I'm striving to do that or to act in that way in accordance, with that community. And, the action that I'm taking, that's consistently looking at issues that are happening. For instance, to tie it kind of back to this conversation, we're seeing really, really high death rates for Black trans women across this country. So what do you do with that? You look at the stats, you look at the resources, you read articles, you talk to people, which is a whole nother category in and of itself. But, you do what you can and make sure that you're building in these pieces of self-awareness and self-reflection in the ways that you're acting and in the actions that you're trying to take in order to, ascend or in hopes to be considered an ally. But nevertheless, that's not the goal. A title's not the goal. What the goal is pure support. So if we focus, I think, on the people who already do know and are aware and want to do something about it and start talking to them about what allyship really means and what that can look like for them in their individual context, I think that's kind of how we start to push the needle forward.
That's amazing. This is a great comment. I want to chime in really quick. Allyship and peer support, really important also for currently incarcerated people, no? This is where it intersects with the systemic issue. Because yes, there is an issue with wrongful conviction, but the larger picture is that this is the country with the highest incarceration rate in the world. That we have a hyper incarceration going on, and this is a systemic issue. Really, we need to take down these prisons and jails, and look for ways. And even the panelists alluded to that. Who is lucky to have families and friends who are supporting them while they are trapped in a violent system with terrible food, by the way, and the health is declining. And a friend of mine has given me this information this morning I want to share, that currently incarcerated people, and some of our attendees will know incarcerated people, do qualify for the 1,200 stimulus payment. You have to file until October 30th. I'm posting in the chat a support email address. If you know people who are incarcerated, they are eligible now, get this stimulus check. Don't want to distract, but this is just also an important information and how we can be allies. The time has progressed. I'm calling you for last statements, comments, questions. You are welcome to just unmute yourself.
I just want to say thank you to you all for the good work that you all do, the guys inside and out. And this right here is very informative for a lot of people that might not know. I just want to thank you all. And thank you for having me.
Thank you, Roel.
And I can say the same. I really appreciate people who help get the word out. That's one of the biggest things, just awareness. You know, when people know, they change, and then they get ideas, and hopefully, you know, those ideas are toward positive goals. And I think 99% it's all positive, you know. And thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Well, thank you.
I really appreciate it because I've learned something from everybody here on this panel, everyone. So it's well thought of and and this is great. I think I've learned a whole lot from everybody here.
So there's a little baby.
Oh, the baby.
This is Marielle.
Oh, she's beautiful.
She got the comic club on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And if you want to support the baby, everyone out there, if you want to support the baby, you shop at the Comma Club.
Right.
The Comma Club is Roel's clothing line. Really cool hoodies, T-shirts, and hats, and everything.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be calling you about that, man. To get that link.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. If we have no more questions, I'm thanking every single one of you. I'm thanking the people behind the scenes. I've learned so much, and I want to learn a lot more. I'm giving the word to the student leaders of the University of Tiffin University for the closing. Isabel and Kaylee, you are up. Thank you and bye.
Thank you all. We'll be in touch.
Hi, I'm Isabel Conrath. I'm the president of OIPU at Tiffin University. I just want to say thank you to our panelists for putting on such a great event, really educational. I hope everyone got a lot from it. Thank you all for coming. Before you go, there is just a link in the chat box for the eval, the event. If you could fill that out, there's also an opportunity to enter a raffle for some OIP swag. If that's optional, but if you'd like to do it, that's there. And there's also the link to the website, the event website that has information in the recording if you want access to it. So those are both in the chat.
Okay, hi, my name is Kaylee Krieger. I'm the secretary for our chapter at Tiffin University for OIP. So there's a couple upcoming events that I'd like to speak a little about. So on Tuesday, October 20th at 7 o'clock, there will be a virtual book club about the book Picking Cotton, Our Memoir of Injustice and Redemption with Jennifer Thompson. So Jennifer Thompson founded Healing Justice based on her personal experience as a crime survivor whose case resulted in the conviction being overturned more than a decade after the trial and conviction. She became close to the exoneree, and so their book is, again, called Picking Cotton, Our Memoir of Injustice and Redemption. So that'll be on Tuesday, October 20th at 7 o'clock. And then we're looking at November 18th, and there's another event called Songwriting with Soldiers. So Songwriting with Soldiers is a nonprofit that works primarily with military service members and their families. And through their work, professional musicians, including Grammy winners, meet with a small group of people who have the trauma and likely have PTSD as they talk to musicians, create songs with the participants about their experience. And last spring, Songwriting with Soldiers engaged with OIP for a first venture with other people with trauma. So that event will be on November 18th.
November 18th. Wow.
Yes. So we have 2 upcoming events that people can look into attending as well.
That's wonderful. You find all the links on this event website. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Kaylee and Isabel.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
God bless.
God bless.